All right, everybody, thank you so much for joining us here today as we kick off Hispanic Heritage and Latinx Heritage Month at Pennsylvania Western University. My name is Chris LaFuria, Digital Communications Director. I'm here to welcome our visitors and welcome our guests and welcome everybody to this presentation. I'm just going to do a short introduction of all of our panelists today, and then I will turn it over to our speakers who have their presentation ready for you. So some quick introductions. We have Dr. Stephanie Diaz-Morel. She is from Edinburgh's Social Work Department. We have Dr. Sheila Lorenzo de la Peña, also from Edinburgh in the Art Therapy program. Dr. Andrea Vargas Sensic, she is in the History, Philosophy, and Modern Languages Department. And we also have Dr. Sandra Trejos from Clarion, and she is with Finance, Accounting, and Economics. So thank you so much for joining us for Café con Leche. It's a panel discussion about Latinidad. This live panel, moderated by Dr. Diaz-Morel, will explore how culture impacts our daily lives and will feature the faculty members from the Penn West campuses of Edinburgh, California, and Clarion. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Diaz-Morel for our Latinx Heritage Month presentation of Café con Leche.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for our Café con Leche panel discussion about Latinidad, how culture impacts our lives. Since 1988, from September 15th through October 15th in the United States, we observe and acknowledge Latinx Heritage Month, or also known as Hispanic Heritage Month. And that's an opportunity to recognize and celebrate the culture, contributions, and the heritage of American people whose ancestors came from Mexico, the Caribbean, Spain, Central American, and South America. We recognize the adopted term of Latinx Heritage Month, as the term Latinx centers on the people of Latin American origin or descent, and is used as a more English-speaking inclusive term that's gender neutral to Latino or Latina. There's also the term Latin. And I would just like to firstly acknowledge the historical activism of all of those who have historically advocated, struggled, and fought for Hispanic and Latino individuals of origin, for people of color to be allowed to be integrated in academic space, as historically they were not. And it's thanks to their efforts that we are all gathered here today to discuss Latinidad. So as today's discussion is a Café con Leche discussion, pictured here is a Café con Leche. And it's similar to a latte, but culturally, having a café con leche is a tradition that includes more than just enjoying a cup of coffee. Saying to someone, let's enjoy un café con leche, you are inviting them into your home, into your life. You are creating this kind of deeper connection and an opportunity for authentic conversation. Café con leche can be a way of life in many Latino, Latina, Latinx households. And it's also very common to sit around the table at family gatherings and to drink and enjoy some café con leche for hours and engage in conversation. So today we're hoping to take that feeling that comes with café con leche and that authentic conversation and share it with you all via this panel discussion. So before we begin, I would like to take a moment to acknowledge you and ground ourselves to this day, to this moment, and to being present. There is a lot going on in everyone's individual lives and the lives of those you share life with. And actively learning during a time in which our lives and routines have shifted in an ever-changing world can be challenging. So the impact that it has on you and in each of your loved ones' lives varies. And yet we are collectively sharing this space today as we navigate through many of life's challenges. So I'd like to just take a moment to acknowledge your efforts in seeking to learn more, in focusing on this moment. And if you feel that it's helpful to you, I invite you to take a deep breath in and exhale. We'll do that one more time. We'll take another deep breath in and exhale, and ground yourself to this moment, to this time, and to being present. And with that, I will open up for our panel discussion. Here is just a map that represents some of what we are talking about. We mentioned Latinidad. Apologies for that. And we'll begin with our first question to the panel. So the question is about heritage. Would any of you like to share a bit about your own heritage and or your connection to Latino, Latina, Latinx, or Latin culture? And this can be, sharing about your own experiences, family or friend custom that you enjoy, your favorite dish or dishes, and anything else about familia, right, or cultura or Latinidad that you'd like to share.
Can I go? All right. Sheila, I'm a naturalized citizen. So I came to the US when I was about 9 or 10 years old. And after a very long process, then I'm here. I really, really like, and I think this goes with what you were saying, Steph, about the café con leche, or in my house, we normally just say un cafecito. But I like cooking with people. And I'm thinking that comes from some of that, like, sharing of stories and sharing of being with people. Like, I don't like to cook in the kitchen and have people be somewhere else. And I don't like to have the food prepared before people get there. I'm like, no, everyone's coming into my kitchen. Here's a knife. Here's a cutting board. Help me do this. And we share the stories, and we kind of like share in the story that's being created by cooking together, kind of like what grandma used to do with me or what my mom used to do with me, but a little progressive in them. Like, the men can help, right? It's not just like a woman's role to be in the kitchen. Favorite food. Lately, I'm thinking of torrejas and buñuelos, because those are very hard things to come by in PA. What about y'all?
So if you want me to continue, I'm Andrea Vargas Sansage, and I'm from Chile. I was born in Chile. I came to the United States. I was older. I got married. My husband is an American. He's also a faculty here at Penn West. And one of the things that we do at home a lot, because I don't cook, okay, I'm an exception in the group here, is I use a lot of reading. I have already 5 grandchildren. And one of the things that I introduced to them, and we have a lot of books, and we have a bookcase. There's all books in Spanish, and of course, all levels. My older granddaughter is 7. And I introduce the culture through the book. So we sit there at home, playtime. My study is share, is have playground, have study for me to work. And that's how I transfer a lot of my culture, the language, the family, tell stories, and when childhood. And so through the books, through literature in Spanish is how I share where I'm coming from. And it's something that also art. My mother paint, and a lot of the things that we do at home as a family relate to art. So I transfer that also to my grandchildren a lot.
That's beautiful. That's very inspiring. Yeah, so I'm originally from Costa Rica. I was raised and born and raised in Costa Rica. I did my bachelor's in economics at University of Costa Rica. And my husband and I, we got blessed by this funding to do a master's in economics by USAID, the Agency for International Development. And in this part, I share with humility just to convey the point that there are ways, different ways. We all have a unique way on how we ended up where we are, right? So in the path that all of us can follow in a very exceptional way. All of us, you, students, faculty, and staff, anyone, Latino or not, who is where you are. Like there is a reason why we are where we are. So for me, it was just the desire of getting a PhD in economics, to be honest with you, because, okay, let's call it, she was a nerd in economics. I just know that I studied a lot of it, and I wanted to pursue further studies in economics, and we got this opportunity. It was a blessing. I really mean it like that. So in that sense, I became an immigrant because, okay, so we started, continued with, we had the opportunity to continue with the PhD in economics in the same place where we started the master's. And then we went back. We were for the University of Costa Rica, but we came back again, you know. And when we came back, we already had three daughters, but two were born while we were doing graduate school, so they were U.S. citizens, right? We were not. We had the student visa, and there was a third daughter who was born in Costa Rica, and then we come back supposedly for a year just to, you know, save some money really, and just test how it was now to be in the United States as faculty members instead of students. And we ended up staying because opportunities opened up. This was the year 2000, and this is the year 2022. So 22 years later. So I'm a Costa Rican. This is my description of my being a Latina in the United States, because someone maybe came when you were little, Sheila, right? My daughters, some of them were born in the United States. The third daughter was born in Costa Rica. She came when she was 1. So that's what I mean. Like, I like to tell the students when I share my identity that it's nice to have open-ended questions instead of yes, no, assuming questions like, oh, yes, you came yesterday, or, oh, yeah, you blank, you know, the preconceived idea that we may have for someone, because maybe we know only these kind of stories instead of these other kind of stories. So I appreciate personally when people say, how did you end up? So that's an open-ended story. So because my story is different from Andrea's, from Stephanie's, from Sheila's, and we embrace it. So in the end, in 2018, I became a U.S. citizen because we were both Costa Ricans who had to go through all the immigration process. And we finally, my husband became U.S. citizen as well. And then the third daughter, who was the only one born in Costa Rica, because the number 1, number 2, and number 4 were born in the States. She became also a U.S. citizen through my husband's application. So we're all U.S. citizens, although we may not look like an American family because, you know, like from the point of view of the looks, but we are U.S. citizens, right? So when they say where this country is a melting pot and we have U.S. citizens who may not sound, look, etc., American, the truth of the matter is we are. So that's when the issue of stereotypes, especially because I've been in a region, and I'm going to be done soon because I know this is a panel. Just this is going to allow me to just kind of like touch on several aspects without giving everything away. It's just that we've been in an area that is not so diverse, so people have questions, and sometimes we are ambassadors responsible to break some of the myths and stereotypes. I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone, for sharing a bit about your experiences, your heritage, your stories, how you connect to your Latinidad. So I am a first-generation American. My parents immigrated to the U.S., which, you know, the United States is a country of immigrants, right? And they came here with the American dream. They wanted to provide a better life for their families and themselves. So when they came, I have two older siblings, and they were both also, of course, came with them. They came from South America and Argentina. And a few years later, after moving to South Florida, then I was born. My upbringing was very unique, I think, because since I grew up in Miami, which is one of the largest cities in the United States, and within itself, a very big melting pot too of cultures, a lot of representation from Spanish-speaking countries, but also from Caribbean countries. And that upbringing that I had, I think, was very helpful in having me connect to my Latinidad. I would go, for example, to friends' houses and have dinner with them and learn about various dishes of different Spanish-speaking countries. So I had this one friend who was from El Salvador, and they would often make pupusas, which are very delicious, but I had never had them before. I had empanadas, was the closest thing that I knew to a pupusa until I went to their house. And then I went home and I said, "Mom, can we have pupusas?" And she was like, "What was that?" She thought I was speaking gibberish, right? And my mother is from Argentina. She, speaks Spanish, but she didn't know either. So, when it comes to understanding Latinidad, and for me, my Latinidad, it's expanding and knowing that there's such a vast, diverse, not just food, but language and the way that we share our culture, the differences and similarities with other Spanish-speaking countries that could be considered Latino, Latina, Latinx, that really it's a continuous learning process, and it's really fun to discover that. So next question, besides culture or ethnicity, what would you say makes someone Latino or Latina, right?
I can start. Yeah, I think, if we separate, as you say, culture and ethnicity, I think the ability or the heart to carry in everything that we do, the pride of where we are, this legacy. And I think it's also the idea of being an ambassador of our heritage. So it's not just, I see sometimes students that, I know because, maybe their last name or when I met them, and I'm assuming, but they may be Hispanic or, and they're shy about and they don't want to, speak in English, perfect English. They were raised here, maybe born here, but the families are from, in a Spanish-speaking country. And then the idea of open and be honest about who you are, and if you're carrying those cultures back home, for example, through your family, be open and have pride about. I think that is a big factor of that can mark, who we are as Latinas, is being an ambassador and the pride. Okay.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah, I think hearing you say that, the anecdote makes me think like, hey, that could go back to my cooking. Like, why invite so many people? Like, you guys want to have dinner? Come on over. Let's do something next week. And sharing those like dishes and the sofritos, or like, how do you start a traditional Latin dish? Like, oh no, everybody, all dishes start with this. Like, it has to smell like you want to eat the pan. I also think, trying to think like customs or like traditions that are passed down that are very kind of, that I sometimes bring out unknowingly, and my husband looks at me like, you know, that's not true, right? I'm like, mom said that it was so, and I still kind of, it's in my mind. The other day I was thinking of like, it's gotten foggy around here, so like el sereno, and my mom like would always tell me like, you have to put on a scarf, you have to put on a sweater, you can't just go outside because it's sereno. And my husband's like, what are you doing? Like, she needs a coat, like our daughter needs a coat to go outside, she can't just go. So I think those are parts of those like cultural stories and heritage that we kind of bring with us. I'm trying to think, there's like so much other things that sometimes I don't carry like in the forefront, but that I'm okay sharing or like talking about whenever. So like I've invited friends to my parents' house when I'm in Miami, and I'm like, hey, yeah, let's hang out. And I forget that on my parents' walls, the largest, most giantest, gaudiest things on the walls are the gold frame quinceañera pictures from when I was 15 with the flowers and the makeup and the heels. And then on the other wall, there's like communion pictures when you're like this with the little book. And it's like, oh my God, I always forget they're there because they've been there all my life. And then when other folks come in, they're like, isn't that you? And that's one of those things that I'm like, oh, that's so Latino, right? To have like the dress, the party, the something to commemorate certain stages of our lives as well.
It's interesting that you mentioned that, Sheila, because it looks like, for instance, Stephanie, I can relate to Stephanie as like maybe our oldest daughters, the daughters who like first generation, right? First generation born here. Well, there are 3 out of 4, but yes, it's almost like, of course, I'm the older generation in this panel. But we did the quinceañera back home in the other home, because I want to acknowledge we're people of 2 homes, which is another aspect that identifies my Latinidad, I think, and my heritage. Like I have two homes, but we intentionally wanted to create liaison connection for our daughters with Costa Rica. So every year trying to go to Costa Rica. I remember I told my husband, I think I can make it in the States if we go every year. Like we put it in the budget and we go, or not, but we go, because I'm not going to have my connection with Costa Rica as a function of money. And I said, aren't you a professor of economics? Yes, it doesn't matter, because for me it was a priority, right? Because you also need to know what your heart can have and how you want to raise your kids. So always going to Costa Rica. So 4 quinceañeras in Costa Rica. Can you imagine, Sheila? 4 quinceañeras. So I think I'm trained now to help organize a wedding, because that was a lot of quinceañeras. But we intentionally, and part of the answering, like about how I am a Latina, how is it that I am a Latina? I am a Latina because I am connected fully in my heart with my home country that saw me grow. And I want to pass it, as Andrea said, with the grandkids and kids and so on, to my daughters. So that they learn Spanish, because I remember the first one said, Mom, why do we need to have this quinceañera? Like, truly, it's okay, I don't need a quinceañera, because of course, this is something that she was not expecting, she didn't need it, this is not a US tradition, although we have the Sweet 16s here. I said, because we're celebrating one daughter at a time with family. We're going to celebrate you this time, and then next time, the next and the next, because it's almost a statement that you're so important, you family, because family, I had it written down, is crucial for Latinos. So we're going to go back, we're being away, we live in another country, US, gratefully, but we're going to go back and celebrate with family who you are. and we're going to have opportunity to dance with them and eat with them and have a nice celebration with the family. So family, Spanish, dancing, plátanos maduros, bistec encebollado. Now we're smiling. Tamales, making tamales with the family, cooking Costa Rican food, as I said earlier I think in the session before I think this started. Being able to cook Latino in Western Pennsylvania, to me, is being myself. So I remember sometimes people will say, well, in the United States, you have access to frozen food. That's a little easier, right? I said, no. We go the Costa Rican way of cuisine. I mean, finally, we learned that fish sticks and pizza, sure, you can buy them frozen and once in a while they help. But cooking our cuisine, being ourselves, not losing who we are, the music we want to sing, the music we want to dance, and connecting with Hispanics in the region as much as possible. That rescues my Latino identity, I should say. I'll stop there. I could go on.
Thank you all. As I hear you speak, I was thinking about some of my own experiences and what besides culture or ethnicity makes me feel Latina or, connects me to my Latinidad. And some of my first memories, like my youngest memories, is when I would go visit family in Argentina. And sometimes I'd go with, one of my parents or one of my siblings, but there were a couple of times that I went on my own because my family was busy. They had summer, usually in the summer when there was no school. And it was very common that when you would come back from summer break, the teachers would ask you, what did you do over the summer? Did you do anything fun over the summer? Or maybe sometimes some of the other students, just amongst themselves ask. And I would tell other students or the teachers, oh, I went to go visit family. And they said, oh, great. Do they live close by? And I said, no, they live in another country. And they would say, you went to another country? And I said, yeah. It's like, oh, how was it? Did you go with your parents? And sometimes I didn't. I would just go alone. And I'd say, no, I just went on my own. And I remember the feeling when they kind of were a bit shocked and confused. Why would parents send a child to a whole other country by themselves?
Right.
And whenever I talked to some of the other students that were also Latino, Latina, Latinx, they would have similar experiences, or they would kind of understand. Mm-hmm. And that was the first time when I was like, oh, okay, this is kind of just part of what makes sense in our culture, because my parents wanted me to have that connection to their home country, even though I was born in the US. I am the daughter of immigrants. This is where they're born and raised, and my family, the majority of them still, live there, and wanted me to learn about their culture and experience that. And at the time when I was a child, I've just saw it as visiting family, but then growing up and then reflecting on it now, I'm so grateful to have had all those experiences, because I have those memories instilled in me. It gave me a greater understanding also of all the sacrifices that my parents made and the hardships, to get here. And there's plenty of other people who go and visit relatives in another state, which is also a far journey, but this was something that was a little more unique, because we're going to another country where you don't speak the language perfectly, and right, there's always differences involved. So, even though I wasn't native born to the country, I would always feel very welcome there, and I would feel like this is where I'm going to see my family. So it felt like a second home. I very much am a child of two countries, of two homes, right? US based and Argentine based. All right. So on that note, talking about Latinidad and what makes us feel Latinidad, let's talk about obstacles, right? Because we've shared a little bit about what that might look like, or biases, or just challenges that we've experienced for where we're currently living, things we've shared with students, with other faculty, with friends or family. So what are some of the obstacles that Latinas, I'm saying Latinas because there are 4 Latinas in the room right now. So what are some of the obstacles that Latinas have faced and still continue to face this day that you'd like to share?
So if I can just continue a little bit with what I started earlier, seeing that we need some seconds, all of us. These are complicated questions. To me, the stereotyping of people, it's one of the obstacles that we face, assumptions that we have, how misinformation or ignorance make people assume things, right? And it goes back to news, it goes back to social media, and it goes back to us. It goes back to us in the sense that I do feel responsible, and Andrea also mentioned the idea of being ambassador. I had mentioned something like that too. That, for instance, especially where there is less diversity, I'm more responsible of being a good ambassador, because people may judge Latinas for Sandra Trejos, because that's a Latina we know, or 3 more Latinas that we have in Clarion or so. They might judge the Latino culture and identity by who I am, because I understand that there are some states and some cities in the United States where actually Latinos may be the majority of the people, but that's not always the case in every town in the United States of America. So you become very much a minority that people don't have a clue about because they are not exposed to it. So it's not their fault, right? And that's why it's important we at least educate students or people in general to, as I said before, ask open-ended questions, since we don't know much about it. Like, don't judge me. I didn't grow up with Latinos, someone may say. So I don't know, like, are you one of those who crossed the border and ended up in Pennsylvania out of luck? Or what is your story, right? And then not everyone has that situation that is actually very unfortunate, and people do it out of being economic refugees. So also the fact that, how about if we just don't judge the story of someone who crossed the border, which I'm not necessarily supporting illegality or being undocumented, but the reflection, and this opens a whole new topic that maybe we can discuss another time, of immigration. Why do people immigrate? Reasons to migrate from one country to the next. I said earlier, for me, it was to get a graduate degree. For someone else, it may be survival. And if someone is willing to cross the desert to maybe find a job that maybe gives her or him an income, the opportunity to earn an income, to maybe. So all these probabilities that go in place just because people are trying to survive economically, and in the literature we call these economic refugees. So not, to me the challenge is to try to work with people's assumptions, judgment, and stereotypes that are not true or too harsh or too ignorant, and without judging them back, right? But just trying to convey. That's why I love this opportunity, for instance, the Café con Leche, to discuss issues and understand what brings Latinas to Pennsylvania. Okay, professor, another professor, this story, the other story, because we are all part of the human race. We are all trying to live a life, and we are all trying to do the best we can with what we do have, the resources and the opportunities that we have that are not the same for everyone, right? And giving everyone the benefit of the doubt. So again, the obstacles that I face sometimes is the assumption, not only because we're Latinos, but because we're women. Because we know that women anyways, overall, sometimes we feel a little more of a challenge in the workforce, or overall at times, finding that work family management. So it's not only being the minority, but also being the international, being the woman. And that brings a lot of aspects that we need to overcome. And that's what we need to believe in ourselves, go back to our roots, be content with who we are. Andrea said it, be proud. And if we have an accent, sure, because I was not raised with English. My second language was not even English yet. So probably I have an accent. Does that make me a worse person? No, I'm just different, right? So exposing people to these truths, I think is important. I'll stop there. Again, I continue. We have the professors into. Thank you.
If I can follow up in, the obstacle, and you mentioned the role of a woman, I had an obstacle. Is how I carry the traditional role of a woman from, the way I was raised, and then being here. And when I just got married, to see my husband doing iron his own shirt, I was like, oh my gosh, how a man can do this? I was in shock. But I changed. I think the obstacle, we all have different obstacles. We can overcome those. And the role of a woman, the way I was raised, it was a problem at one point. And I felt like I had all these obligations because I'm a woman. And I have to take care of the kids myself about education. Or I have to make sure that they, we go to church every week because it's part of who we are. And wait a minute, those roles are divided, and I change. And sometimes the obstacle is not here at home, is when I back home, when I have my mother coming here, and there's no, Mama, I don't have to do this. He can do it. And the obstacles of sometimes fight in our own culture when we are in a different place, and then our grandmother comes or visit, or your sister visit, and how you can do this. That's not something that women will do back home. And that's something that I see also a little bit of a struggle in our female Latin students, so Hispanic students, because they are becoming educated. They are having that opportunity to become, to have a degree, and they are bilingual, fully bilingual. But then back home, there they are with the traditional family, Latino family. The mother has this established role, and there they are, the girls having this internal fight, and they behave one way outside home, and then when they go home, they have to change that behavior because they are at home. So when I meet parents, and that's something that we try to do, I try to do a lot, is our Latina students, when I connect with the families, is to kind of let the parents know that you have to expect changes in your children and your daughter, because it's a different world when you are becoming an educated woman and you are going out there and you becoming a leader. And those things is still a little bit of a problem in our Latino community when you have students first generation going to college. And I think that is something that as older and professional and with experience with families, and we can help overcome those obstacles especially for our female students, the Latinas. So
yeah, that's a great segue. I was gonna say my parents, and it kind of ties you both together, because my parents' reason for bringing us to the States was that like greater opportunity than Cuba would offer to daughters. And then going through the school system here and getting those better opportunities, becoming a professor, a doctor, not the doctor they wanted, but still a doctor. And then facing those challenges that I didn't quite grasp onto until I got this far, of the cultural expectations of, but now you're married, but now you're a mother, right? Like, how come you're going to a conference? How come, you're still at work? It's like this late. You got to cook dinner. You got to, mend clothes. Not that we do that anymore, but, all those things that I was like, wait, but I went to school for so long. Like, this is something that I'm passionate about and I want to do. I mean, it's the reason why you brought me over, but there's a slight disconnect, I feel, for the first generation that kind of brings folks here, like my parents, and then having to help them reconciliate with, and there's some change because of those choices of the past generations.
Absolutely. Great points. Thank you, everyone. What I kind of hear are some of the same thoughts I had, of course, all expressed eloquently and beautifully by you all sharing your experiences. But I think a lot of the obstacles come from intergenerational struggles, come from acculturation, because we're talking about, moving to the US and what are cultural expectations versus in, back home or in the countries of origin, right? Versus now living in the US. What new opportunities are presented with increased education, how these roles in families and work play out, with both. And it can definitely be really challenging. And it reminds me of some of the first times that I noticed obstacles was with my mother. So she was working at a company with my godmother, who was her best friend, who's also from Argentina. And my godmother wanted to go out for a promotion, but her accent was very thick. So she hired a coach to help her sound more like she didn't have an accent. And she was trying to convince my mother to do the same. And my mother was very confused as to, like, she understood why her best friend was doing this, because it seemed like in the, early 90s, this was the only opportunity for her to advance, is that she needed to put on this mask and code switch and sound less like having an accent in order to advance in the company and get to where she would want to be and grow. But my mother felt like, I have an accent because I can speak 2 languages and I understand them both. And I'm, can read and write high proficiency in both. And so what this is really telling me is that if you want me to sound a certain way in order to promote me to fit into the cultural expectation of the US, not that what else is associated with that. And what that also came out to is, feelings that brought up for her about her worth or value in the company because of having an accent. So that was one of the first times I remember. I was very young seeing that happening. And as I, got older, I think about also my name, right? My first name is Stephanie. It's a very American sounding name because my sisters and my mother are all, their names end with Ana. So my mother is Adriana. My oldest sister is Tatiana. My middle sister is Ivana. I was going to be Mariana, but my mom allowed my sisters to choose my name. And since, I came about a year and a half after they were living in the States, and my sisters were now becoming more acculturated, they were speaking English in school, they were making, friends that all spoke English, they were integrated into the American school system. One of the obstacles that they faced is people were mispronouncing their names. And so they said, oh, let's name her Stephanie, because it was a very popular name at the time. And because of the fact that they were hopeful I wouldn't have the obstacle of people not being able to pronounce my name and that would give me more opportunity moving forward. You know, it wasn't until obviously many, many years later that we put two and two together, most recently when we were adults now and had this conversation, especially as they, you know, are talking about just obstacles they face in their life. But something as simple as just, you know, your name, right, being an obstacle for Latinas in this country to this day.
Let's not get into last names and bases.
Lorenzo de la Peña. Trejos.
Yep, absolutely. So we have just about 12 minutes left, and I want to leave some time, Sandra, for you to share as well, but I think we have enough time to probably answer 2 more questions. And then with the last one that ties into a special song that Sandra would like to share and a special message. So this question asks about some Latinos, Latinas, Latinx, who you believe have achieved this notion of progress or the American dream, right? And kind of made it in the US. And, you know, why would you put them into the category? So kind of speaking to what you had mentioned, Andrea and Sandra, about having ambassadors, right? These are people who have reached the status that also society might see them, right? And the larger whole, of course, the work, hopefully that we're all doing as professors. And of course, both you, Andrea and Sandra, have been doing for years as well. But, you know, just people who maybe can fit into this category that we might be aware of, and just to bring them to the spotlight for their Latinidad and for Latinx Heritage Month.
I have 2 who I don't know if they're very known, but they're known to me and my husband. Jenny Lorenzo, she does the sketches of Abuela on YouTube. And she has a podcast with Joanna Hausman, who's a comedian. Technically, they're both comedians. And they talk a lot about this very same issues, like issues of growing up in Miami. And actually, Jenny grew up, like everything she talks about growing up, I was like, oh my gosh, I was in that corner. Oh, I know that high school. I know. And so everything that she talks about, I'm very much like at the edge of my seat. But they talk about being like I think writers and actors and comedians in the US and going through the system and being told that they're not Latinos enough, but that they're too Latina. They have too much accent and they need to talk like in this way versus that way. And they're like, what? And I believe Joanna talks also about this traveling back and forth between the US and her home country and navigating that, as well as aspects of religion and aspects of food and mental health and wellness. And so we really enjoyed listening to their podcast like over the past year. And both their YouTube channels have a lot of these same conversations with more of the comedic flair to it.
Yeah, wonderful. I didn't know that she had a podcast. I am familiar with her and have been watching her videos for quite some time. And you know, in addition to making these parody skits, I know that she's now gotten some larger contracts with like Disney Plus and is doing a bunch of other great things. So that's awesome. Thank you for sharing. Any others?
So when I was thinking of this aspect of like Latinos who have fulfilled their dream, and we can think of, you know, Hollywood stars and singers. I truly want to make it a reflection, to share a reflection of like any Latino who is anonymous out there that we don't know of, who's like being able to raise children out of any job that he can possibly or she can possibly have got, has fulfilled the American dream anonymously, and we will never know it. Like Sheila said, she knows some people, I know some people by names, right? That I'd rather keep as anonymous because otherwise I'll put them publicly out there. I could say first names, but I've got the opportunity, the privilege to have met some Latinos who have fought even more than we fought, right? That have struggled even more than we've struggled. And they've seen their children flourish out of working in factories or even in the fields. So to me, these are the people that I would like anonymously to celebrate today. The people who have fought, believing in a dream that they actually accomplished, maybe not so much for themselves, but you know how parents live their dreams through their kids. Even if we would like to see their dreams come true, but the dreams come true when their children's dreams come true. And in that case, hearing Sheila's and Stephanie's stories of how your parents came to United States to give you a better life, I can relate a little bit with that, because it's not that we said, to be honest with you, we didn't say, let's go to United States to have a better life. Our lives in Costa Rica were fine. I mean, right? It's not that, but we had a dream professionally of working in academia. I'm going to be honest with you. So that's why we said, oh, let's go teach for a year in the United States. You know, that's great, because in the United States, it seems that professors can do that as a full-time job without having to have 2 or 3 jobs, which happens with professors in Latin America a lot, right? They teach, but they have consulting, they teach at 2 universities maybe. So you cannot be fully devoted, which is a big blessing in academia in the United States. You can make it a full-time devoted job and still make a living for a family that you may have, larger or smaller, regardless. So yeah, I would like to just think of every Latino we know, we all, and see how this Latino has fought hard to make it happen for themselves and for their families.
I just very brief that you took my example.
Oh.
Sandra, I was just gonna talk. We do a lot of work with the Washington, PA Latino community. I just want to I couldn't think about someone in specific, but then the moms from these Latino communities. So one of the things that I saw, and I'm connected, is how much they become, you know, they work and they try to maintain those roles, traditional roles, but then at the same time, they're trying to push their children to a better life, and especially go to college or become educated, go into community college. And I just want to praise the moms from these communities that are working so hard to give their a better life for their own children. And so.
Thank you. Thank you both. As you're both speaking, I was thinking about all the efforts of, activists like Dolores Huerta and Cesar Chavez. I did a lot of work when I was in South Florida during my doctoral studies that looked at migrant farm workers and organizing and forming unions, for all these people who are working hard to provide a better life, to send their children to college, to, grow and learn through them. And, I think that those names are historically very important, not just within the Latinx community, but to US history as well. And often their stories don't get told. And I think of a couple of other Latinos who, as a social worker and someone whose research focuses on the impacts of technology and media and representation, I think it's important also when we have representation from various angles and we have people who are storytellers. I feel very proud when I see Latinos on TV winning awards, making speeches, being political activists like Alexandria Ocasio, right, AOC, and Lin-Manuel Miranda, who tells such wonderful stories through his musicals, and the success of sharing some of those stories that are very deeply rooted in versions of Latinidad, like Encanto. I was actually thinking about Surface Pressure, the song Surface Pressure, when some of you were sharing, what pressures you felt or others have felt, right? Students you talked with and worked with as well. So I think that there's a lot of amazing Latinos who are in the US that are silently and visibly achieving the idea of success, but more importantly, they're helping to propel the community forward, and they're sharing our stories to create more cultural understanding and embracing of that. So with that, I would like to turn it over to Sandra, because I know that you have a wonderful message you'd like to share with us.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add, I'm sorry, because I realized I meant to say, and then we ended by just trying to follow our dream. We ended up allowing our daughters to have a different opportunity that they would have had if they had lived in Costa Rica, although with trade-offs. I want to acknowledge that. There are trade-offs that we leave because they say, they didn't grow with the extended family all the time, right? I said we committed to go as often as possible, but that's something that you give up a little bit. So now with technology, it's easier to be compensated. But when we first started, it was by writing letters, right? We didn't have, when I started graduate school, so you realize how old I am, we didn't have email. So it was writing a letter. And so we need to realize that people choose to be in places. No one has to be sorry sometimes, like unless you're a refugee, right? But it's all by will and by choice. So no need to be sorry about anyone. But choices, we know, have consequences and trade-offs. Having said that, so today is Costa Rica's Independence Day, September 15. It's a big day in Costa Rica. It's a holiday. And again, I'm here in the United States and thinking of my country, celebrating in my heart and sending messages and so on. So I had asked Stephanie that if we had time, maybe I could share a song that is called Soy Tico. Tico and Ticas is a nickname for Costa Ricans, right? Tico, the Costa Rican male version of the Costa Rican adjective, and ticas. So I'm a tica, and ticos and ticas are the Costa Ricans who are celebrating independence today. So I have this song. It may get long. But I want you to see it with a critical mind, in the sense that, please, as I said earlier, maybe if you have remaining questions, I'll be available for questions by email or anything like that. But of course, we don't judge, right? We don't judge a country by a picture or two or three. We don't judge a country by a video. A video is trying to capture aspects of a country, but also aspects that are not, we're not going to undermine them, but we don't want to generalize. We want to just see how we have moments or aspects of Costa Rica in this song that make Costa Ricans proud. I can say that. Is Costa Rica more than that? Of course. I mean, this is a song and it has a video, but always thinking that there is more to things than what we see sometimes. So having said that, I'm just going to share it with you. There you go. You should see that, right? Yeah. Okay. Oh, I think the song has been playing. Okay. For you all.
Soy Tico, Nico Nenange, Costa Rica. Pura nini yuna toye la kako. Echenge na putuko. Taka na unge marahore tenge la kako. Huerinia ha na poretica.
This is one of the dialects that we may have for indigenous groups.
Soy Tico, porque llevo a Costa Rica en las entrañas, porque lloro cuando escucho una guitarra, cuando trema la marimba y con la puesta del sol. Soy Tico y si me asomo a la ventana, me cautiva la montaña y se me alegra el corazón. Soy tico porque siento las canciones de mi tierra, porque vibro con la luna liberiana, caballito nicoyano, la patriótica y pasión. Soy tico y cuando miro la alborada, el lamento del yigüirro me acelera la emoción.
Y cuando caen los fuertes aguaceros, es como si yo fuera la semilla. Me huele a tierra fértil el sendero, llenando de ilusión mi alma sencilla.
Soy tico porque cada vez que encuentro a un amigo forastero le demuestro mi calor. Soy tico porque vivo enamorado y orgulloso de la tierra que ha inspirado mi canción.
Y cuando caen los fuertes aguaceros, es como si yo fuera la semilla. Me huele a tierra fértil del sendero, llenando de ilusión mi alma sencilla. Soy tico porque una guaria morada me engalana la mirada y me impresiona de verdad. Soy tico y si eso no te dice nada, yo te mostraré mi patria, dame la oportunidad. Yes, man.
Soy tico, pura naturaleza, playas, volcanes y mucha belleza. Tico, estoy bendecido, mi gente es amable, mi pueblo es querido. Tierra fértil que te inspira. Aire puro es lo que se respira. Flora y fauna muy colorida. Soy tico y por eso soy pura vida.
¡Opa! Soy tico porque amo la patria mía. De noche y de día parrandeamos con alegría al ritmo de una marimba y un buen wipipía. Ser tico es una bendición, se me infla el pecho de emoción de llevar el blanco, azul y rojo en mi corazón. Por eso soy tico, soy pura vida. ¡Que viva Costa Rica, mi patria querida! ¡Acabó!
Soy tico porque cada vez que encuentro a un amigo forastero le demuestro mi calor. Soy tico porque vivo enamorado y orgulloso de la tierra que ha inspirado mi canción.
Cuando caen los fuertes aguaceros, es como si yo fuera la semilla. Me huele a tierra fértil el sendero, llenando de ilusión mi alma sencilla. Soy tico porque una guardia morada me engalana la mirada y me impresiona de verdad. Soy tico y si eso no te dice nada, yo te mostraré mi patria, dame la oportunidad. Soy tico y si eso no te dice nada, yo te mostraré mi patria, dame la oportunidad.
That was wonderful, Sandra. Thank you so much. So many different variations and
Unity.
yeah, beautiful collaboration of all the different views of Costa Rica and the music styles. It was, the people, that was wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today for the Café con Leche panel presentation on Latinidad. And I hope that you have enjoyed the conversation. Feel free to reach out. I'll make myself available. I know Sandra's offered as well if you have any questions or would like to discuss more. But muchísimas gracias por estar aquí. Thank you, everyone. And I hope that you have a great rest of your day.
Likewise, thank you. Take care. Viva
Luego.
Latinoamérica. Bye
Sí.
bye.
Chao, mujeres poderosas.